A shy and inexperienced man goes on a crime spree to impress a woman who's into bad guys. Nick Twisp is an aspiring novelist who hates his last name. He collects classic books and Frank Sinatra vinyl records, which might be the reason why he has no intimate experience yet at breakfast. His mother Estelle is pissed since she suspects her boyfriend Jerry is cheating on her. However, the man, easily sweet, talks his way to gaining her favor again. Their neighbor Mr. Ferguson delivers their mail to Nick as he always does. He's a prolific activist and has been caught harboring undocumented immigrants. Later, Nick asks his dad George for an allowance, but the man tells him to talk to his mom instead, since he's crippled with child support payments. Just then, George's girlfriend, Lacey, approaches and makes out with his dad. Nick watches in disdain since everyone else is getting action, except him and his best friend Lefty. While hanging out with him, Lefty admits his insecurities about pursuing his crush, since he's afraid of making a mistake when he makes love with her. This convinces Nick that his friend is more miserable than him. That afternoon, 3 sailors visits Nick's home since Jerry sold them a faulty car. Nick tells them to return when Jerry's around and suggests they get physical with him, hoping to see the man hurt. The trio happily agree while looking for a movie to rent later. Nick strikes up a conversation with the female classmate, but they're interrupted when the woman's boyfriend insults Nick's chosen film and leaves with his girlfriend. The lonely man remarks that it's always the bad boys who get the women in real life. When he returns home, the sold car is already parked in their driveway and vandalized with a threat. Estelle and Jerry question Nick about it, so he tells the couple that the sailor came by to avoid them. Jerry invites the mother and son to his friend's cabin, only to take them to a dirty trailer home in Ukiah. Pissed at the man, Nick later asks his mom if her relationship with him is going to last. She just excuses that it's hard to find someone interested in old women like her. Before joining Jerry in the bedroom the following day, Nick heads to the public shower when a woman named Sheena Sanders gives him a cool look. Her smile fills him with amazement as he showers after. Nick returns home and sees Sheeny speaking with his mother, who asks her son to help the lady pick up groceries with. He accompanied Sheeny, stunned at how he ended up helping the beautiful woman instead of seeing the sailors beat Jerry up. She gives him a tour at her home when they return, and in her bedroom, Nick sees a poster of Jean Paul, whom Sheeny admires from the film Breathless. This leads them to talk about classic films and music, impressing Nick since he hasn't met a lady who liked them. 2. He learns that Sheeny prefers French media and wants to live in France and travel the world instead of being stuck with her exhaustingly religious parents. Before Nick leaves, the man musters up courage and invites Sheeny to the beach tomorrow. To his surprise, she agreed. The following morning, Nick goes to pick her up but meets her father, Mr. Sanders. The man reminds Nick that he's responsible for Sheeny's safety. Before the lady joins her friend at the beach, Sheeny asks Nick to put sunscreen on her back, but this gets him excited, which the woman notices. Embarrassed, Nick tries to move away, but she tells him to apply sunscreen on her legs, next allowing him to caress her. As they're heading home, however, Sheeny reveals that she has a boyfriend named Trent. Not wanting to lose face, he makes up an awesome girlfriend and criticizes Trent before leaving. That night, Nick anguishes is over losing his chance with Sheeny. He realizes that he might never be with a woman if he doesn't change his personality, so the next day he visits Sheeny and quickly apologizes for acting immature about Trent. He invites her out again, but she's going on a hike and can't take him since he's not prepared, wanting to be a different person. Nick insists that he does his hiking freeform so he doesn't need any gear. Because of this, Sheeny scales an incline in the forest with ease, while Nick struggles behind. After Nick relieves himself, he finds the woman reading his journal, which upsets him. She offers him her journal to make things fair, but she'd written her thoughts with her unique handwriting to keep her parents from snooping. This upsets him, further spouting that he doesn't want to read about Trent anyway. Sheeny assures him that she hasn't properly made love with Trent, so she's inexperienced like him. They then stare at each other until Sheeny commands him to kiss her. When he takes her home later, Nick confesses his love to her, but she doesn't say it back. Her mother, Mrs. Sanders, sees them from the window and confronts them, so the two part ways. Jerry soon finds a trailer for sale, and Nick invites Sheeny to check it out with them. To his awe, she perches her hand on his thigh during the ride, while Jerry negotiates with the seller. Later, Sheeny spots puppies for sale and eyes Nick to buy one for her. After he does, she names the dog Albert, after a French philosopher. That night, Nick finds a note in his pocket that Sheeny slipped in while they were making out earlier. In the letter, she apologizes for reading his journal, though she found his depressing contemplations and made-up girlfriend emotionally evoking and charming. The note ends with her saying that they should just enjoy their lives and take things in stride. His thrill of having Sheeny is short-lived when they meet in a diner the morning after Jerry hurt his back, so Nick and his family has to return to Oakland for treatment. Sheeny is devastated, but only because her dog chewed the family Bible, so she needs someone to adopt Albert. With that, Nick volunteers. However, he's worried that Sheeny will fall in love with someone else while he's gone. The woman just comments that she can't put her life on hold for him, so Nick suggests that they run away or have him kicked out of his mother's house so he can move to Ukiah if his father gets a job there. Sheeny admires his determination, though she notes that to get kicked out of his mother's house, Nick has to be very bad with a plan in mind. Nick soon returns home with Estelle and Jerry only to find the vandalized car somehow inside the house. As his mother freaks out about this, Nick goes to the backyard, but discovers that Lefty has been camping there. He told his parents about his sister's relationship, so she made his life miserable, and he had to get away to lighten the mood. Lefty then updates him about his romantic endeavors, revealing that he got a book about lovemaking to prepare. Interested, Nick borrows it. Later, Sheenie calls to check on Albert and asks if Nick had done anything yet. When he hesitates, she pressures him, saying that she could eventually marry some guy named Francois if he doesn't shape up, threatened that his nice personality isn't enough for Sheenie. Nick decides to create an evil persona for himself named Francois. One morning, Officer Westcott visits the report that Jeffrey suffered a heart attack and passed away. Estelle mourns, especially when Westcott says that Jerry's wife is claiming his car, having not known that the man was married. As the officer embraces his mother, Nick returns to his room and finds his persona discontented about his inaction, saying that he should act now if he wants to get some action with Sheenie. Nick argues that his mother is grieving, but Francois insists it's the perfect opportunity to destroy what she loves. With this in mind, Nick flushes her jewelry, cut her ladies' wear, and vandalizes Jerry's trailer. Meanwhile, Sheenie pretends to be a headhunter to set George up for a job in Ukiah, so Nick has the place to stay. However, Nick hates that George will apparently be working for Trent's dad once his father has moved there. Nick approaches his mother only to find her having breakfast with Westcott, who stayed the night. The son then asks if he can move in with his dad, but she refuses since she needs the child support money to eat. Nick points out that the money should be for him, but Westcott tells him to respect his grieving mom. Sometime later, Nick as Francois hears the new couple showering together, so he turns up the water heater, interrupting their time. The next day, Francois complains about the noise the two made last night and admonishes how Westcott moved in without asking for his opinion. The officer warns him to stop, but Fran dares him to shoot if he doesn't. When the man can't do it, the teen flips the cereal bowl and leave. Nick soon heads out to ride Jerry's car and crash it, but Fran joins in with 2 fuel canisters, suggesting they light the vehicle on fire. Instead, reluctantly, Nick follows Francois's destructive plan. Despite his plea for restraint, Francois agrees sarcastically, then hits a pothole that spills the fuel canister. He continuously does this until the trailer detaches, careening down a slope, and crashes into a cafe. Nick leaves the car in half. But Francia also exits and lets the vehicle slide down the slope. It crashes into the trailer and explodes while everyone stares at Nick. Before he runs that night, he returns home but finds that Woko and his mother are aware of the crash. Estelle worries about her son's arrest, so her new boyfriend suggests reporting the car as stolen, earning her girlfriend's grateful affection. Westcott also suggests that Nick leaves before the detectives arrive, so his mother calls George to pick him up, unaware that this was his plan all along. The next day, Nick returns to Ukiah and immediately calls Sheenie, reporting that he caused a fire so they can be together unbeknownst to them. Her mom secretly picks up the line to listen in because of this. When Nick visits her, the parents block him and reveal their plan to send Sheenie to boarding school to avoid the bad influences in the town, especially him. Later, Sheenie calls him to report that she convinced her parents to enroll her in a French prep school, turning this disaster in her favor. In contrast, Nick is devastated that she's leaving to make things worse. George reveals Trent's transfer to a French prep school, implying Sheenie will be with her boyfriend when he starts in his new school. He meets VJ, who's heard about his relationship with Sheenie. VJ wishes to attend the same French school that Sheenie transferred to, leading Nick to realize that his new friend speaks French. Because of this, he asks him to translate Sheen's letter for him, where he learns that the lady now has a promiscuous roommate, and Trent is the popular guy at school. The two deduce that the roommate is a bad influence, and Sheen's boyfriend will blind her from Nick's charm. With that, Nick decides to follow her, and VJ tags along, wanting to meet the roommate. Soon they drive up to the prep school, where Sheenie and her roommate Taggarty spot Nick holding Albert. The woman is happy that Nick came all this way with Albert, while VJ charms Taggarty with Sanskrit epics. Instead, Taggarty invites the men to stay for the night. That night, the roommate seductively climbs the bed in front of their guests. The two men then prepare to sleep on the floor. Though Tager still stares at them meaningfully, Nick then sees Francois sitting in one corner, disappointed at his lack of initiative. He takes this cue to go beside Sheenie and suggests doing something intimate, but she refuses since there are other people in the room. Disappointed, Nick washes his face in the public bathroom when a sullen student named Bernice finds him there, wanting to ruin his rival's reputation. Nick claims that he heard about her from Trent, who criticized her features, and this effectively pisses the woman off. He then returns to the room to find VJ and Taggy already getting it on with Fru. Speaking for him, he invites Sheenie to a night of passion, and his assertiveness convinces the woman to say yes before things happen. However, the door opens and the matron finds them as Bernice has reported them. The men hurry to escape and drive off with Albert. Nick is frustrated that he was so close to being with Sheenie, while VJ marvel at his time with Taggarty. Just then, the car runs out of gas, forcing the two to walk until they find a phone booth. Nick calls Mr. Ferguson and lies that he got stranded while getting at undocumented immigrant to safety to convince him to pick them up while waiting. VJ says the ladies can be expelled for what happened, and Nick hopes this means Sheenie will return home. Mr. Ferguson soon arrives and wonders why the men don't have their clothes. VJ excuses that officers took his clothes, while Nick claims that he removed this for solidarity. Because of this, their savior drives them home, shirtless as well. After they dropped VJ off, they head to Nick's home so Mr. Ferguson could stay over. However, they find George arguing with Lacey. The following day, Nick meets Sheen's brother Paul, who invites him to hang out. The teen asks how he knows him, so Paul vaguely alludes to the fire Nick caused in his talk. One later at school, Nick learns from VJ that Sheenie wasn't expelled because Tiger convinced the matron that she was innocent. Frustrated, Nick hatches a new plan and sends a letter to Bernice. He claims to forgive her for telling on them and suggests teaching Trent a lesson for mocking her by getting Sheenie expelled. To do this, he sends Bernice medicines to mix into Shine's drinks. This will make her sleep through her classes and drop her grades. When Nick returns home one day, he finds Paul with Lacey and Mr. Ferguson, who've had some of the younger man's herbs. Paul also offers Nick some mushrooms, and taking them makes his time reading left the love book a lot more lively. George later arrives to find everyone hammered, so he scolds everyone until Paul punches him. This gets him and Lacey thrown out of the house. Before they leave, Paul invites Nick to Thanksgiving dinner since his sister will be there soon. Nick prepares for the dinner when his mom calls. She and Westcott broke up, so he stopped covering Nick and the police are coming to arrest her son. This makes Nick nervous, but he proceeds to dinner despite Francois warning that it'd get him arrested. Lacey, who's now living with Paul, greets Nick at the house, while the parents are spaced out on the couch after eating their son's stuffed mushrooms. Nick then goes into Sheen's room to find her crying since she was expelled. He feigns shock and suggests they run away again. Before Sheenie can decide, Lacey calls them for dinner. The group enjoys their meal until Trent visits. The man immediately reveals that he found Nikki's letter in Burns' room, so he reported his rival to the police for having Sheenie sedated to get her expelled. Because of this, Nick runs back to his house, asking his dad to help him escape. However, George knows what happened and wants him to take responsibility, so Mr. Ferguson tosses Nick his car keys. Instead, quickly, the T drives off, but soon stops, deciding that he can't disappear while Sheenie hates him. He wants to tell Sheenie that he did everything for her. Francois argues that he'll be caught. Pissed at his evil persona, Nick pushes him off and storms off. Soon after, Francois has a change of heart and agrees to help him only if he gets some action. With that, the evil side calls Westcott and tells him to meet him in Hazel Park later. Nick watches the park over a cliff and spots the police. He then notices the nearby river and comes up with a plan. He discards his clothes inside the car and uses a rock to send the car off the cliff and dive into the water, faking his death. However, the water is apparently shallow, thus foiling his plan. The scene leads the police to spot him, so Nick runs and hides in a women's clothing store. He proceeds to disguise as a woman to visit Sheenie. To appease her mother, he lies about memorizing church hymns with her daughter, so Mr. Sander lets him in. Sheenie immediately recognizes Nick, so they head to their bedroom to talk privately there. She confronts him about destroying her life. However, Nick defends that he did everything to be with her. He's been alone all his life, so he understands her gripes about her dull life in Ukiah. Hearing this, Sheenie decides that he's the Francois she's been looking for. Nick corrects her that he's not Francois, but just the guy who fell in love with her. Still, this convinces the woman that he's the one, so they finally make love, thus fulfilling Francois' role. So he leaves. Suddenly, Trent storms in, revealing that he saw Nick dressed as a woman to visit her, so he called the police. However, Sheenie tells Trent that she shouldn't have feelings for him, so he should leave them be. This angers the man, so he fights Nick until a police officer comes in and cuffs the fugitive. Sheenie assures Nick that he'll likely just get 3 months in juvie, so she can wait for him as the authorities take Nick away. He acknowledges that he has achieved this goal. Sheenie isn't in love with some fancy French bad guy and is instead devoted to the meek Nick Twist, but because he's enough for her,